The pot of chili had been simmering for 2 hours, and I kept stirring it, even though it didn't need stirring anymore. That's what I do when something's sitting wrong in my chest. I find a task and I work it to death. My daughter had texted me that afternoon to say she'd be 20 minutes late. Marcus never texted. He just showed up, usually early, usually carrying something he thought I needed. That evening he showed up with a bottle of hot sauce I hadn't asked for and a grin that reminded me so much of his mother it made my throat tighten. "Dad," he said, dropping his coat on the hook by the door, the way he's done since he was 9 years old. "It smells incredible in here." "Chili?" I said. "Your grandmother's recipe. You say that every time." "It's true every time." He laughed and pulled a stool up to the kitchen counter, and I watched him the way fathers watch their sons when they think no one's looking, checking for tiredness around the eyes, checking whether he'd lost weight. Marcus is a thoracic surgeon. He operates on hearts for a living, and sometimes you can see the weight of that on him. That evening, he looked good, though. Rested, lighter than usual. My daughter arrived 23 minutes late. Not 20. With her coat half-buttoned and her hair pulled back in the rushed way she does when she's coming straight from the office. She's an accountant. Numbers are her whole world. She kissed me on the cheek, said the chili smelled incredible, same words as her brother, which made me smile, and sat down across from Marcus at the dinner table. We ate the way our family has always eaten, loud, overlapping, with nobody finishing a sentence before the next one started. Marcus talked about a patient who had given him a hand-carved chess set as a thank you. My daughter talked about a client whose books were a disaster. I talked about the neighbor's dog who had decided my front porch was his personal territory. It was a good evening. It was exactly the kind of evening I'd spent the last 4 years of retirement trying to build more of. Then Marcus set down his spoon and looked across the table at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Dad," he said, "how's the workshop coming along?" I looked at him. "The workshop," he said again, slower this time, like maybe I hadn't heard him. "Son," I said, "what workshop?" The table went quiet. Not the comfortable kind of quiet that settles between people who know each other well. The other kind. The kind with weight. Marcus put both hands flat on the table. "The one on Caldwell Road. The space I funded for you." He paused. "Dad, I gave Diana $150,000 8 months ago for your retirement woodworking studio. She said she'd handle everything, finding the space, the build-out, getting your equipment set up." He looked at me steadily. "You've been in there, right? You've seen it?" I had not been in there. I had not seen it. I had not heard one word about a studio on Caldwell Road or anywhere else. I had not received a single dollar. I had not been told there was money. I had not known any of this existed until the moment my son said it out loud at my kitchen table. I turned to look at my daughter. She was already standing up, not saying she needed something from the kitchen, not excusing herself to the restroom. She was simply on her feet, her napkin falling from her lap to the floor, and then she was moving toward the front door, and then she was through it, and then the sound of her car engine starting came through the window, and then she was gone. Marcus and I sat there in the silence she left behind. He looked at me. I looked at him. The chili was still steaming. "Dad," he said quietly, "you really didn't know." It wasn't a question. He could see from my face that I really didn't know. I'm 64 years old. I spent 31 years as a carpenter before my knees started filing formal complaints. I built things with my hands, houses, cabinets, furniture that people still use and will probably pass on to their grandchildren. When I retired, the one thing I'd allowed myself to dream about was a proper woodworking studio. Not a garage setup, a real space, with good lighting and proper ventilation, and enough room to build something large. I'd mentioned it once, maybe twice. In that offhand way you mention things you don't actually expect to happen. Marcus had apparently taken it very seriously. And someone had taken the money. I want to be careful here about what I say and what I don't say, because there are things I knew in that moment and things I didn't know yet, and the things I didn't know yet matter enormously to how I understand everything that came after. What I knew that night, sitting across from my son with a pot of his grandmother's chili going cold on the stove, was this. My daughter had been given $150,000 intended for me, and she had not given it to me And when the subject came up, she had left rather than explain. What I did not know yet was why. And the why, as it turned out, changed everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Marcus stayed for another 2 hours that night. We talked carefully, the way you talk around something that hurts. He wasn't angry, or if he was managing it the way surgeons manage things, with precision and containment. He told me he'd wired the money to my daughter's account directly, at her suggestion, because she'd said she wanted to handle the logistics as a surprise for me. He'd trusted her completely. We both had. She's the organized one, the one who handles details, the one who managed our mother's estate without a single error when our mother passed 6 years ago. After Marcus left, I washed the dishes and dried them and put them away, and then stood at my kitchen sink for a long time looking out at the dark backyard. I have a Japanese maple back there that I planted when my wife was still alive. It was bare that time of year, just the dark skeleton of branches against the sky. I stared at it until my eyes went dry. Then I called my daughter. She didn't answer. I called her again the next morning. Voicemail. I sent her a text that said only, "I think we need to talk. Please call me when you're ready." I kept it simple because I am 64 years old and I have learned that there is no version of a complicated text message that ends well. She didn't respond that day, or the next. On the third day, I drove past the address Marcus had given me on Caldwell Road. I don't know exactly what I expected to find. Some part of me, the foolish, hopeful part, thought maybe there would be a studio there. Maybe the money had been spent exactly as intended and there was just some misunderstanding about the timing or the announcement. And I would pull up and see a nice building with good windows, and I'd feel like an idiot for worrying. What I found was a vacant commercial property with a for lease sign in the window. Dusty glass, empty shelves from whatever business had been there before, a padlock on the door that was clearly not new. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for a while. Then I called my friend Clyde. Now, I want to describe Clyde to you, because Clyde is important to this story, and he deserves a proper introduction. Clyde Beaumont is 67 years old, retired from the Postal Service, and has 2 distinguishing characteristics. The first is that he knows absolutely everyone in a 30-mile radius and their business. The second is that he watches an extraordinary amount of true crime television and therefore believes himself to be something of an investigator. He is not an investigator. He is a man who owns 4 different colored highlighters and uses them on printed Google Maps, which he calls establishing the terrain. I told Clyde what had happened. He was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Harold," he said, "don't touch anything. I'm coming over." "There's nothing to touch, Clyde. I'm in a parking lot." "Then don't leave the parking lot. I'm establishing the terrain." He arrived 20 minutes later with a legal pad, 2 highlighters, yellow and orange, and an energy he usually reserves for football playoffs. He circled the building twice on foot, peering in windows, with his hands cupped around his eyes, which attracted the attention of a woman walking her dog across the street, who slowed down to watch us with justified suspicion. "Clyde," I said, "we're going to get the police called on us." "We're just looking," he said. "Looking is not a crime. Looking is a constitutional right. The constitutional right is freedom of speech. Looking isn't in there." "Harold, are you a lawyer?" "No." "Then let me work." The woman with the dog had stopped entirely now and appeared to be typing on her phone. I suggested to Clyde that we move this operation somewhere less public, and we ended up at the diner on 5th, where I ordered coffee, and Clyde ordered coffee, and a slice of pie, and then spent 10 minutes drawing a diagram on his legal pad that I believe was supposed to represent something meaningful, but looked mostly like a weather map. "Here's what I know," he said, tapping the diagram with his orange highlighter. "The money went to her account. That's established. The space was never rented or built out. That's established. She has been avoiding contact for 3 days. That's established. So, the question is not whether she took the money. The question is what she did with it." This was, I had to admit, a logical framework. "Medical," Clyde said, lowering his voice, even though no one at adjacent tables had any interest in our conversation. 9 times out of 10 in these situations, it's medical. Or gambling. But your daughter doesn't gamble. She does not gamble. "Medical," he said again, with the air of a man closing a case. I didn't say anything. I was turning over everything I knew about the last year of my daughter's life, sifting through memories the way you sift through an old toolbox, looking for the thing you need. She had seemed tired for most of that year. I had attributed it to work. She'd visited me less than she used to, and when she did visit, there was a quality to her attention, a slight absence, like part of her mind was somewhere else that I'd noticed and not said anything about, because she's a private woman, and I respect that. Her son, my grandson Cooper, had been quiet the last few times I'd seen him. He was 15. I'd figured quiet was just what 15 looked like. He'd been thinner than I remembered. I'd mentioned it to my daughter, and she'd said he was going through a growth spurt, eating them out of house and home, not to worry. I was, sitting in that diner, beginning to worry. "Clyde," I said, "I need to go talk to her. Not by phone, in person." "Agreed," he said, like I'd proposed a tactical maneuver. "But Harold, go easy. Whatever's on the other end of this, she's your daughter. Go easy." I drove to her house that evening. It's a 30-minute drive through the kind of countryside that still makes me feel grateful even when nothing else does. Old farms, tree lines, the occasional red barn. I made myself breathe steadily, and I made myself remember every version of my daughter I had ever known. The 5-year-old who used to fall asleep on the living room floor with her shoes still on. The teenager who cried for a week when her hamster died, and then spent a month reading about hamster habitats to make sure she hadn't done anything wrong. The 22-year-old who sat next to me in the hospital when her mother was dying and held my hand without saying a single word, which was exactly what I needed. I pulled into her driveway and sat in the truck for a moment. Every light in the house was on. She answered the door before I knocked. She'd been watching from the window. She looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days, which is probably because she hadn't. Her eyes were red at the edges. She was still wearing work clothes, even though it was past 7 in the evening. She didn't say, "Come in." She just stepped back from the door, which I understood to mean the same thing. The house was quiet. Her husband was traveling for work. Cooper's bedroom door was closed at the end of the hallway, a strip of light underneath it. We sat in her living room. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, very straight, the way she sits when she's trying to hold herself together by sheer posture alone. I sat across from her. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then she said, "I was going to tell you. I want you to know that first. I was going to tell you." I just kept waiting until I had a plan for how to fix it, and every time I thought I had a plan, something else happened, and then it had been so long that I didn't know how to start the conversation anymore. I said, "Start it now." She closed her eyes. She opened them. She said, "Cooper has leukemia." The word landed in the room and stayed there. I looked at my daughter's face, and I saw what I had been seeing for a year without understanding what I was looking at, the exhaustion, the absence, the way she'd gone somewhere I couldn't follow. It hadn't been work. It had been this. It had been sitting in hospital waiting rooms and meeting with oncologists and making decisions no parent should have to make alone, and she had done all of it quietly, without telling me, without telling Marcus, carrying it the way she carries everything. By herself, because she is stubborn and proud, and she learned that from me. "How long?" I said. My voice came out quieter than I expected. 14 months, she said. He was diagnosed 14 months ago. I thought about all the times I'd seen Cooper in the past 14 months. The birthday dinner in September, when he'd eaten half as much as usual. The holiday visit when he'd fallen asleep on the couch at 9 o'clock. I had seen a teenager going through something, and I had told myself it was just adolescence. I had not seen what was actually happening because no one had let me see it. "Why?" I said, and I stopped, because there were several things that sentence was reaching toward, and I needed to be sure I was asking the right one. "Why didn't you tell us?" She pressed her lips together. "Because Marcus would have wanted to fix it immediately. You know how he is. He would have taken over not because he's controlling, but because he loves us, and he can't stand feeling helpless. And I couldn't handle being managed. I couldn't handle someone else's grief on top of my own. I needed to handle it. I needed to be the one handling it. I understood this. I did not like it, but I understood it. "The money?" I said. "The money." She looked at her hands. "When Marcus told me he wanted to fund your studio, I said I'd manage it, and I meant to. I found the space on Caldwell Road. I talked to a contractor. I had a real plan. And then 3 weeks later, Cooper's treatment stopped responding to the first protocol, and his oncologist wanted to move him to a clinical trial at a facility in Baltimore, and the out-of-pocket costs were... She stopped, swallowed. Our insurance covered most of it. Most. The trial itself, the travel, the extended stays, the gap between what insurance approved and what the facility charged, it added up. It added up so fast. How much? I said. By the time it was done, all the way done, $138,000, she said. Over 8 months, I did the math without meaning to. $150,000 given, $138,000 spent, $12,000 left, which I was willing to bet she had been saving to either return to Marcus or put toward what remained of the original plan, depending on which way her conscience tipped first. He's in remission, she said. Her voice broke slightly on the last word. 6 weeks ago. He's in remission. He's going back to school next month. She looked up at me. I know that doesn't fix what I did. I know saying he's okay doesn't erase the fact that I took money that wasn't mine to take, and I lied to both of you for 8 months, and I didn't give you the chance to choose to help. That was wrong. I know it was wrong. I knew it was wrong when I did it, and I did it anyway because I was terrified and I didn't know what else to do. There was a long silence. I thought about $138,000. I thought about Baltimore. I thought about my 15-year-old grandson on a different treatment protocol in a facility 3 states away, going through something that would hollow out a grown adult, while his mother drove back and forth and paid bills and sat in waiting rooms and did not tell anyone. I thought about how frightened she must have been. I thought about how lonely. I thought about what I would have done if she had called me 14 months ago and said, "Dad, Cooper is sick, and I need help." I knew exactly what I would have done. I would have given her everything I had. I would have sold things. I would have called Marcus. I would have moved to Baltimore if that's what was needed. I would have done whatever it took, immediately, without hesitation. She had not given me the chance to do any of that, and that was the part that hurt. Not the money, not the studio I never had. The part that hurt was that she had been in the worst year of her life, and she had decided to go through it without me. "Can I see him?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "Cooper. Can I see him?" She stood up and led me down the hallway and knocked once on his door. And when he said, "Come in," she opened it, and there was my grandson sitting on his bed with a textbook open in his lap. And he was thin, thinner than I'd realized, but he had color in his face that hadn't been there in September. And when he saw me, he said, "Grandpa," with a kind of surprised relief that told me he'd known something was wrong between his mother and me, without knowing what. I sat on the edge of his bed, and I asked him how he was feeling, and he said mostly, "Okay. Tired sometimes, but mostly okay." He showed me the textbook he was reviewing, catching up on months of school he'd missed. His handwriting in the margins was still the same handwriting. It had always been cramped and left leaning. The same handwriting he'd had since 3rd grade. I stayed for an hour. Then I hugged him carefully, the way you hug someone who's been through something, and I told him I'd see him soon, and I meant it. My daughter walked me to the door. We stood on the porch for a moment. "I have to tell Marcus," I said. "I know, and we have to figure out the money. Marcus needs to know what happened to it." "I know that too." She looked at me. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorrier than I know how to say." I looked at my daughter in the porch light, and I thought about the fact that she had spent 14 months watching her son go through hell, largely alone, and that she had done it, and that her son was inside doing his homework. She had made a wrong choice in a terrible situation. She had lied to protect it. She had carried a secret that would have broken most people in half. "I know you are," I said. I drove home on the same roads I'd come in on. The farms, the tree lines, the red barns going dark. I called Clyde from the driveway before I went inside. "Medical," I said. "Medical?" he confirmed, quietly, without any satisfaction. "Cooper?" "Cooper." Clyde was quiet for a moment. "He okay?" "He's okay. 6 weeks in remission." "Lord," Clyde said. "Just that." "Then, you okay?" "Working on it," I said. The call with Marcus was the hardest thing I've done in a long time. And I've done some hard things. I told him everything, not in pieces. not softened, but the whole thing from beginning to end, the way he deserved to hear it. He was quiet through most of it. When I told him about Cooper, the clinical trial, Baltimore, I heard him exhale in a specific way that told me he was doing what surgeons do, pushing the emotional response down to a place where it couldn't interfere with his thinking. He didn't speak for a long moment after I finished. Then he said, "She should have told us." Yes, she should have called us the minute Cooper was diagnosed. I would have. I know, I would have too. She had no right to make that decision for us, to take away our chance to help. No, I agreed. She didn't. Another long silence. "Is he okay, Dad? Tell me honestly." "He's doing his homework," I said. "He's going back to school next month." I heard Marcus breathe, in and out, slow and careful. The way you breathe when you're very relieved and very angry at the same time, and you need both of those things to coexist without destroying each other. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not hurt," he said finally. "You shouldn't pretend. And I'm not going to pretend the money doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the way Cooper matters, obviously. But it was given in trust, and it was used without permission, and that's real," I said. "Don't minimize it." "I just need some time," he said. "I need some time before I talk to her. Is that okay?" "Take the time you need," I said. "But take it, and then talk to her. Don't let this sit." He said he wouldn't. I believed him. Marcus has his flaws. Said allowing things to fester is not one of them. He's too much like his mother for that. She never left an important thing unsaid for long. It was one of the things I loved most about her. Over the following 2 weeks, things moved in the careful way that real family situations move, not the way they move in movies, where revelations lead immediately to dramatic confrontations and resolved tears, but slowly, circuitously, with awkward phone calls and long pauses, and small gestures that were really large gestures in disguise. My daughter called Marcus. I don't know exactly what was said because I wasn't there, and neither of them gave me a full account, which I think was right. Some conversations belong only to the people having them. What I know is that the call lasted over 2 hours, and that my daughter cried through most of it, and that Marcus asked her a list of specific questions about Cooper's treatment and prognosis in a way that was equal parts brother and doctor, which was probably exactly what she needed. She called me the next morning and said simply, "We talked." "Good," I said. "He's still angry. He's allowed to be. He wants to come see Cooper." "Of course he does." She paused. "Dad, I keep thinking about the fact that you had the chance to be there. For all of those months, you and Marcus could have been there, and I took that from you, from all of us, from Cooper. I'd been thinking about this too. It was the thing that kept surfacing when everything else had settled, not the money, not the studio, but the empty chair. All those waiting rooms where I wasn't sitting. All those evenings when Cooper might have wanted his grandfather there, and his grandfather didn't know to come. You were trying to protect everyone," I said. "I understand that. I don't agree with it, but I understand it." "It was selfish," she said. "I thought I was protecting you, but I think I was also protecting myself. From having to explain, from having to be seen struggling." This was, I thought, probably accurate, and it was also one of the more honest things she had ever said to me, which meant something. "You were seen struggling the moment I sat in your living room," I said. "And the world didn't end." She made a sound that was half laugh, half something that wasn't a laugh. "No," she said, "it didn't." 3 weeks after that dinner, the dinner where Marcus asked his question and my daughter left the table and everything changed, we had another dinner. Same kitchen, same table, same chili recipe, because I believe in returning to things and remaking them when they've gone wrong. Marcus drove up from the city. My daughter came with Cooper, who ate 2 bowls and asked for a third, which I found deeply gratifying. We talked about Cooper's treatment. We talked about what the next year of monitoring would look like, what to watch for, how often he'd need to be seen. Marcus spoke in his doctor voice at first, all precision and information, and then, somewhere in the second bowl of chili, he shifted into something softer, and he asked Cooper what it had actually been like, the year of it. And Cooper answered in the straightforward way that teenagers sometimes answer important questions plainly, without performance, which made it more affecting than anything dressed up would have been. He said there were days when he was so tired He couldn't remember being not tired. He said there were days when he was scared, but didn't want to show his mom because she was already scared enough. He said the nurses at the Baltimore facility had been kind, and that one of them had brought him a book about chess that he'd gotten genuinely interested in. He said that being in remission felt strange, like he kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. He said he was glad we were all here now. The table was quiet for a moment after that, not the heavy kind of quiet, the other kind. My daughter looked at her son, and then at her brother, and then at me, and I saw something shift in her face, some long-held tension releasing, finally, like a knot coming undone. Later, after Cooper had gone to sit in the living room with his phone, and the three of us were doing the dishes, Marcus said, "I want to talk about the money." My daughter straightened. "I'm not asking for it back," Marcus said. "I want to be clear about that. What it was spent on, I would have given that money in a heartbeat if you'd asked. You know that." "I know," she said quietly. "But I need you to promise me something," he said. "If something happens, anything, medical, financial, whatever, you call. You don't carry it alone. You call me, you call Dad, and we figure it out together. That's what this is. That's what family is supposed to be." She was gripping the edge of the counter. Her knuckles were pale. "I know," she said. "I know that. I'm sorry it took," she stopped. "I'm sorry it took me so long to remember it." Marcus looked at her for a moment. Then he put an arm around her shoulders the way he used to when they were kids. And she leaned into it. And they stood there at my kitchen sink, looking out at the Japanese maple, which was still bare but somehow didn't seem as bleak as it had 3 weeks ago. I dried a bowl and set it in the cabinet. Now, here is what I want to say about the question of forgiveness, because I know it's the question that matters most, and I know there are people who will hear this story and say that my daughter did something unforgivable, that she stole, that she lied, that she chose deception over trust, and those people are not wrong. What she did was wrong. It was a wrong choice made in a desperate situation, and the desperation doesn't erase the wrong. Those two things are both true at the same time. What I know, at 64 years old, after a lifetime of building things and watching them stand or fall, is that people are not their worst choices. They are also not their best ones. They are the whole complicated thing, every scared decision and every brave one, every moment they failed the people they loved, and every moment they showed up anyway. My daughter made a wrong choice. She also spent 14 months fighting for her son's life, with everything she had, in the way she knew how, which was alone and without complaint. I can hold both of those things. It took me 3 weeks to be able to hold both of those things, but I got there. And the studio, about a month after everything came to light, Marcus called me and said he wanted to revisit the original plan. Not the money that had been spent, but the idea. He'd talked to my daughter, and she'd offered to contribute what she'd managed to save, and Marcus wanted to add to it. And between the two of them, they had a number they wanted to sit down and discuss with me. I told Marcus that was not necessary. He told me it was not a discussion, said it in the cheerful, bull-headed way he has when he's decided something, which he also inherited from his mother. We sat down, we discussed. There was a space on Henderson Avenue, smaller than the Caldwell Road location, but with better natural light and a landlord who was willing to do a build-out as part of the lease. My daughter had already been in contact with the landlord, which I found out later she'd done before she'd even told Marcus her plan, because she is an accountant and she works the numbers before she makes any announcement. The first time I walked into that space, bare walls, concrete floors, the smell of old wood, and possibility, I stood in the middle of it for a long time. I thought about the 31 years I'd spent building other people's things. I thought about my wife, who used to say that I should build something just for myself one day and stop giving everything away to strangers. I thought about my grandson sitting at my kitchen table eating chili and asking for a third bowl. I put my hand on one of the bare walls. Good bones. That's the first thing I look for: good bones. Solid structure. Something you can build on. That's what we have. Our family. All the cracks, and the failures, and the wrong choices, and the things we're still working through, we have good bones underneath all of it. And good bones, in my experience, are worth more than anything else. I'm finishing the first piece in the studio this week. It's a table. Long, wide, oak, with hand-cut joints and legs that will outlast everyone in this story by several generations. I'm making it big enough for all of us. Big enough that nobody has to sit somewhere else. Big enough that there's room for everything, the apologies, the explanations, the things that don't have a clean resolution yet. Big enough for Cooper's third bowl of chili. I'll have it done by spring. If you've been listening to this story, I want to ask you something before you go. Have you ever found out that someone you love had been going through something enormous without telling you? Not to hurt you just because they couldn't find the door to let you in? What did you do with that? Leave me a comment below. I read every one. And if this story meant something to you, share it with someone who might need to hear it today. There are more stories where this one came from, and I'll be right here to tell them.